This was taken straight from the federal courtroom where Sean Diddy Combs is on trial, according to reporting by Inner City Press. The room was quiet, uncomfortably so, until she began to speak. When Dawn Richard, the former Danity Kane member, stepped up to testify, you could feel the shift in the air. This wasn't just a celebrity giving a statement. There was more weight to her presence. She had something to say that the room wasn't ready for. She was someone who had witnessed more than most. What came next was a haunting description of a violent scene. Eggs thrown, a skillet used as a weapon, and Cassie Ventura cowering on the floor, terrified. By the time she finished, the polished picture Diddy had tried to maintain was in pieces. He leaned into his lawyers, whispering nervously, pacing back and forth. Witnesses said he looked completely unhinged. This wasn't just a court case. It felt like a long overdue reckoning. And this was only week one. The courtroom had already been rocked by emotional stories, long-buried pain, and shocking evidence. From leaked audio to heartbreaking accounts from former collaborators, everything pointed to a legacy under threat. When Dawn Richard entered the room, the atmosphere changed. You could feel it. Something big was coming. There were no camera flashes, but all eyes in the courtroom, jurors, lawyers, even Diddy, were fixed on her. For years, Dawn Richard had been known as a breakout star from Making the Band and part of the girl group Danity Kane. But in this courtroom, she wasn't a performer. She was a witness with a story that demanded to be heard. She sat there not as a celebrity, but as a witness ready to speak her truth, and it would shake the courtroom to its core. Her presence was steady, but the weight of what she carried was unmistakable. She took a deep breath before speaking, and then everything spilled out. Her first account, a disturbing incident from 2009 that set the tone for what was to come. According to her testimony, Diddy stormed downstairs in his Los Angeles home, visibly agitated and frantic over a missing phone. Cassie was in the room. Instead of asking calmly, he barked demands. When she didn't respond quickly enough, he allegedly threw a skillet full of eggs in her direction. The courtroom reacted with audible shock as Dawn described how Cassie instinctively tried to shield her face. He was shouting at her, Dawn recalled. Cassie dropped to the ground, curling up like a child trying to protect herself. But that wasn't the end of it. Dawn testified that after Cassie was already down, Diddy tried to kick her, then grabbed her by the neck and dragged her up the stairs. Not long after, Dawn said she heard the unmistakable crash of breaking glass. It wasn't just a sound, she said. It was fear, palpable, lingering in the air like smoke. Dawn wasn't guessing or repeating gossip. She made it clear. She saw it happen with her own eyes, and she said it under oath. Her account quickly became one of the most vivid and unsettling moments of the trial, a first-hand glimpse into the alleged violence behind the closed doors of one of music's biggest powerhouses, a man who, to the public, embodied success and glamour. What shocked the courtroom even more than the skillet incident was what Dawn revealed next. This wasn't just a random act of rage, she said. It was part of a bigger pattern, a system, a culture built on control, silence, and intimidation. Behind the flashy lifestyle was a hidden world ruled by fear. Behind the glitz of red carpets and chart-topping hits, Dawn described a man who controlled every aspect of the women around him, especially Cassie. She said Cassie had to ask permission for everything: where to sit, what to say in interviews, what to wear, even what to eat during long studio sessions. But it wasn't just control. Dawn said it was a form of psychological manipulation, a kind of emotional battle. Diddy reportedly built an environment where women were both admired and belittled. Dawn remembered him holding meetings in just his underwear, speaking harshly to women in front of others, and making them go through long, exhausting rehearsals with little food or breaks. But it was Cassie who suffered the most, Dawn said. Cassie couldn't leave the room without permission and wasn't allowed to say no to any requests. If she didn't comply, Diddy would punish her by removing her from events, canceling her shows, or simply ignoring her for days, leaving her waiting for a call that never came. One of the most unsettling parts of Dawn's testimony was how Diddy kept Cassie isolated. She said Cassie was discouraged from reaching out to family and friends, and at times her phone was taken away under the guise of security. Dawn said that whenever Cassie showed any frustration, Diddy would tell her, You don't know how good you have it. As Dawn spoke, those watching noticed Diddy's changing reactions. At first, he stayed calm, but then he crossed his arms and began whispering urgently to his lawyers. Someone inside the courtroom shared that his lawyers even handed him a pen and paper, and he shook his head as he wrote something down. The calm facade was starting to break. The grip he once had was clearly fading right before everyone's eyes. Just when Dawn Richards' testimony seemed powerful enough, the prosecution surprised everyone by bringing out something completely unexpected. It was an audio recording, not a phone call or voicemail, but of Cassie herself. The recording captured a desperate moment where she confronted one of Diddy's close associates. Apparently, this person had secretly recorded her during one of the notorious freak-off incidents. The courtroom grew quiet as Cassie's voice played over the speakers. She sounded anything but calm. Her words were frantic, angry, and pleading. You could hear the panic in her breathing and the urgency in her tone. "Delete it," she reportedly said. "I swear, if you don't, I'll—" But her sentence was cut off abruptly. Though the words were cut off, the emotion was clear. The threat hung heavy in the air, and the fear behind it was even more powerful. Legal experts following the trial said the recording could work both ways. On one side, it showed Cassie as upset and unstable. It might even make her seem dangerous. But on the flip side, it revealed something more profound. The mental strain of someone pushed to their limits. A person who had faced years of humiliation and was finally reacting, not out of anger, but to protect themselves. The defense tried to block the recording, saying it didn't show the full picture. Still, the judge decided it could be used in the trial. As the recording played, everyone's attention shifted between the speakers and Diddy. His response was immediate. Witnesses said he looked clearly upset. His jaw tightened, lips pressed together, and at one moment, he turned away from the screen, rubbing his forehead in frustration. Some people said he looked like a man hearing something he never expected to be shared in court. This wasn't just another shocking moment. It revealed how deeply Cassie had been pushed to her limits. It wasn't just the accusations that carried weight anymore. It was the raw emotional damage you could hear in her voice. The recording showed a side of the story that no photo or paper could ever capture. Her words drew the jury closer, while Diddy seemed to shrink back. What made Dawn Richards' testimony so striking wasn't just how she showed up. It was how she made everyone in the courtroom feel the fear. She went back to the well-known skillet incident, making it clear this wasn't just a sudden outburst. Instead, she said it was one step in a long series of planned acts meant to intimidate. Dawn told the jury that Diddy didn't just lose his temper. He carefully planned his reaction. It was clear to her that he had acted like this before. She described that morning as full of tension. Cassie looked anxious, and Diddy was pacing angrily, upset about a missing phone. Dawn said that when Diddy thought Cassie had taken the phone, something inside him changed. He yelled her name so loudly it felt like the walls were shaking. Cassie came downstairs in her pajamas, and he quickly accused her of stealing it. Then, without warning, he threw the skillet. Dawn paused, looking down calmly as the room went quiet. But you could tell the emotions were just under the surface. He didn't throw a small pan or a fake prop. It was a heavy cast iron skillet, still warm and full of food, and it hit her. Dawn went on to describe how Cassie fell, curling up with her arms protecting her head, while Diddy stood over her, yelling. Dawn said she wanted to step forward but couldn't move. Fear kept her frozen in place. He turned and looked at me, and honestly, I've never seen eyes like that before. Not angry, just empty, like I didn't even exist. Then he supposedly dragged Cassie upstairs. A few minutes later, glass broke. When one of the prosecutors asked Dawn why she didn't step in, her answer was powerful and unforgettable. If I had tried to stop him, I truly believe I wouldn't be standing here today. By the time Dawn finished, the prosecution's story was clear. Diddy wasn't just controlling, he was accused of being violent, emotionally manipulative, and skilled in psychological abuse. But the defense wasn't ready to accept that without a fight. The next day, they launched an intense cross-examination of Cassie, aiming to weaken her credibility. They began by bringing up her mental health history, PTSD, rehab, and counseling, trying to suggest these were signs of instability rather than the result of trauma. But Cassie stood firm and didn't waver. Instead, she embraced her story. "Yes, I went to therapy," she said, "because I needed to heal from him." The defense brought up a past rape allegation Cassie made years ago, one that never led to charges, implying she had a history of false claims. But Cassie stood her ground. "It wasn't false," she said. "It was simply ignored." Then the courtroom was flooded with hundreds of texts, some romantic, some raw, some explicit. The defense focused on certain messages, trying to make Cassie seem desperate, obsessed, or even willing. They pointed to one where she said, "I'll do anything you want. Just don't leave me." When asked about it, Cassie was clear. She said it showed how she was controlled and manipulated. That's what abuse feels like. The courtroom fell silent. People even say the stenographer briefly stopped typing. The defense pressed on, bringing up a FaceTime call Cassie supposedly took from her husband while she was still with Diddy. They argued this showed she wasn't trapped, that she had choices. Cassie looked right at the lawyer and said, "I didn't have choices. I had responsibilities. I was controlled." People watching noticed how Diddy responded during this moment. His shoulders tensed, jaw set tight, and he whispered urgently to his lawyers, as if trying to take back control of a story slipping out of his hands. It was obvious that no matter what plan his team had, Cassie wasn't breaking under the pressure. Actually, she was gaining strength. Then the audio played, the most emotional moment of the whole week. It didn't come from a witness on the stand, but from a recording. The prosecution said it was given by a former employee who used to work security at Diddy's parties. The tape captured Cassie leaving a desperate, urgent voicemail to someone close to Diddy. Cassie's voice came through, demanding, "Delete that video, or I swear I'll end you." Everyone in the courtroom listened closely. The recording showed more than just threats. Cassie was crying, gasping for breath, swearing. Her voice broke under the stress, sometimes hard to understand. This wasn't about control. It was about fear. It was pure panic. The video Cassie mentioned, reportedly showing her in a compromising situation with Diddy and a male escort, was being used to blackmail her, the prosecution said. And it wasn't just Cassie. Many women close to Diddy were caught in this web of control. The recordings acted as a safety net. Prosecutors said Cassie found out about the video after she left Diddy, and her frantic message was her desperate attempt to get rid of proof that had been used to embarrass and manipulate her for years. The defense pushed back against this claim. The defense argued the recording was taken out of context, but the judge decided to keep it in. Once the audio finished, Cassie stayed composed, even when the defense tried to paint her as hostile. She simply said, "I was desperate, because if that video ever got out, it wouldn't just ruin my life. It would destroy everything I had fought so hard to get back." One juror was seen wiping away tears, and the courtroom reacted instantly. Diddy went pale, nervously tapping his foot beneath the table. He leaned in close to his lawyer, whispering for several minutes before removing his glasses and covering his eyes. His entire empire was built on control, but now for the first time, that control seemed to be slipping away. If there was one clear message from the trial's opening week, it was this. The public image of a mogul, philanthropist, and music legend was far from the truth behind closed doors. The courtroom was turning into a place where his carefully crafted facade was breaking apart. Over the week, witnesses revealed more than just isolated incidents of anger or abuse. They painted a much darker, ongoing reality. Witnesses didn't just share isolated stories, they revealed a system. A calculated environment of emotional control where affection was twisted into a weapon and loyalty was something bought rather than earned. Several people close to Diddy described him as a man obsessed with his image, terrified of losing control, and willing to go to extreme lengths to maintain his power. One former assistant, testifying under the name Monica, talked about what it was like working for him. She described strange rules like not making eye contact unless spoken to, and even being told to lie to Cassie about where Diddy was. Monica shared a disturbing memory of overhearing Diddy instruct a staff member to clean up a woman who was clearly drunk and unconscious in a hotel room after a party. She also remembered a tense moment when Cassie confronted him in front of the staff about being pressured to take part in another freak-off. Diddy reportedly laughed coldly and said, "You belong to me." The room went silent, and Cassie walked away with tears streaming down her face. These incidents weren't just random events. They painted a picture of control hidden behind charm. Meanwhile, outside the courtroom, the media started digging up clips from Diddy's old interviews. There were times he joked about wild parties and being a bad boy for life. But looking at those moments now, they didn't seem like harmless fun. They felt more like hidden admissions. Legal experts said that even though the defense claimed Cassie took part willingly, each new witness made that story less believable. The repeated control, the manipulative messages, the pattern of anger followed by grand apologies. It all pointed to emotional imprisonment, not a loving relationship. Prosecutors said that was the darkest truth of the whole case. It wasn't just the obvious violence that was shocking. It was how it became normal. Cassie didn't stay because she wanted to. She stayed because she forgot she had a choice to leave. The jury watched these stories like they were part of a dark psychological drama. Meanwhile, Diddy, who entered the courtroom with confidence and swagger, now sat silently, watching the carefully crafted image he built over years slowly unravel. As the trial moved into its second week, everyone was waiting for one name to take the spotlight: Aubrey O'Day. Aubrey O'Day, known for being outspoken and unfiltered, had made headlines with her comments about Diddy before, but never in court and never under oath. Everyone expected her testimony to shake things up, and it certainly did. Aubrey stepped onto the stand clearly emotional. She started by describing her experience on Making the Band, where Diddy reportedly controlled everything like a strict drill sergeant. Contestants faced constant humiliation, harsh yelling, and threats of being kicked out for even small mistakes. She said the whole process wasn't really about creating stars, but about breaking people down. What shocked everyone was what she revealed happened once the cameras were off. Aubrey claimed that Diddy closely watched his female artists, paying special attention to Cassie. She recalled one time when she walked into a soundproof studio and saw Diddy yelling at Cassie, calling her boring and saying she was killing his energy. He then threw a laptop against the wall, breaking it just inches away from Cassie's head. Aubrey also mentioned that many of the so-called freak-offs described earlier didn't only involve Cassie. Aubrey explained that many women around Diddy, like assistants, stylists, and dancers, were often invited to private parties where the lines between consent and pressure were unclear. The most shocking part came when she talked about a Miami party where Diddy allegedly told male executives to sample the menu, which she later clarified meant the women there. When prosecutors asked if she had seen Diddy use drugs around these women, Aubrey nodded in agreement. Aubrey named the drugs she saw around Diddy's parties: ecstasy, MDMA, cocaine, like they were just candy. Then she looked straight at the jury and said, "People often wonder why." Cassie didn't leave. Her answer was clear. When someone controls your music, your money, your body, and your future, it's not just a relationship. It's like being trapped in a prison. During this part of the testimony, Diddy reportedly buried his face in his hands. Reporters said his body language looked like he was collapsing inward, taking blow after blow from a story he never wanted the public to hear. The image of the fun-loving mogul was quickly disappearing. By the end of the first week, the prosecution had achieved what many believed impossible. They had made one of the music industry's most untouchable figures appear vulnerable and on the verge of breaking down. The evidence wasn't just about facts, it carried emotional and psychological weight that built up over time. Legal experts noted that this case had moved beyond just one instance of abuse. It was now about a whole system of control, a culture shaped and maintained by Diddy, where women were seen not as equals, but as possessions. They were part of a system he controlled. Several former staff members, now speaking out, confirmed that recordings of sexual encounters existed. Some even testified that Diddy called these tapes his insurance. That disturbing phrase came up again and again during the trial. Meanwhile, Diddy's lawyers quickly changed their approach. They brought in character witnesses and played past interviews where Cassie spoke positively about Diddy. They claimed she stayed because of the lifestyle benefits. But prosecutors countered every time with texts from Cassie that revealed something else. A story of fear and guilt, of duty. She wasn't happy or free. She was stuck, unsure how to break away. And the jury? They weren't just hearing the words. They were seeing it all unfold. Seeing Diddy shrink back in his seat, hearing witness after witness tell the same story. Behind the music, behind the fame. The last moment of the week was when the prosecution showed a list with more than 60 lawsuits against Diddy. These women accused him of everything from sexual misconduct to trafficking and emotional abuse. One victim was just 9 years old when the incident allegedly happened. The courtroom fell completely silent. The judge called for a break for the weekend. Diddy stood slowly, looking down, avoiding the cameras as he was led away. Week one had ended. For the first time in many years, Diddy wasn't in control of the story. Instead, he was caught in the middle of it.